Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Visual Studio Toolbox Live. We're not doing a release party today. That's because we're talking about a very specific topic, and that is agent skills, something that's become popular seemingly overnight. Like I remember just finding out about it when I got back from a quick vacation in February, and it was seemingly everywhere in like the 3 days that I was away, and I'm like, what the heck? So this is an episode that's going to be all about agent skills, why you should use them, and how you can use them in Visual Studio. So as always, if you'd like to follow along, be sure to pull up Visual Studio, ideally the latest version. It's got a lot of good goodies on there since we talked about it in last week's release. And feel free to ask any questions that you have related to agent skills today, because today I'm joined by 3 awesome members of the VS and .NET teams who are here to share everything you need to know about agent skills in VS. So I'm joined by Simona, Wendy, and Yunjung. Hey, y'all.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hey.
Sweet. So before we kick things off, would each of you like to go around and share what you do, what you work on? I'll kick things over to Simona first.
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Simona. I'm a PM in the Visual Studio Copilot team, and then I've been working on agent skills and then bring it to you all, to Visual Studio. So I'm super excited today to go really deep and talk about what they are and how they can benefit your agentic workflow. I'm gonna pass it to Yunjung.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yunjung Choi. I'm a product manager working on Azure Skills and Azure MCP, and my main focus area is improving the development experience on Azure via various AI assets available.
Awesome. And hi, everyone. I am Wendy Briding. I am a product manager on the .NET team, focusing on the Copilot experience for .NET developers.
Great. So now we've got introductions out of the way. Let's talk about skills. What are they? Where do they come from?
I'm gonna get started with that. So I'm gonna cover the basics on, what are skills, where do they live in VS, how do you create them, and then I'm gonna pass it to Yanja and Wendy, who are the experts in Azure and .NET, to go more deep into those. So how I like to think about skills is I think they are reusable capabilities that you define to extend your agents. So imagine, you don't have skills, you don't have anything customized, you just talk to your agent, you give it a one-time prompt, and then agent get it, and then the model will start to reason, and then the model will decide how you want to handle this task, and it'll just go off and do it. And then because we all know model is non-deterministic, so maybe you ask your model to do the same task using the same short prompt you have every time, it can just decide to do it, handle it differently. And then the result you get, maybe it's not always consistent. So that's what I really like about skills is it can help you perform structured tasks more reliably, kind of help with that issue. Like when you think about your workflow, probably there are some tasks you do every day is quite repetitive, and then they always follow certain steps of, step 1, step 2, step 3, like guidelines to go through, and those would be the things perfect for automation using your agent. And then you can define all those steps and guidelines and how to perform a specific task in a skill file, and then hand it over to your agent. Then your agent will know exactly how to perform that task in the specific way you defined, and then giving you more reliable and consistent result. So I think that's why skill is super valuable. Like it can reduce the repetition you have in your workflow. You can automate more of it, and also giving you more reliable and consistent result. So that's kind of how skill is like in a nutshell. Yeah.
Cool. I think at the time when I was first learning about it, I had some confusion as it related to like Copilot instructions. And I feel like Copilot instructions are more specific to like one repository versus a skill, which can be applicable to your entire workspace and how you just do a particular task, whether that's like how you write tests or how you write an MCP server or something on a day-to-day basis, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good way to think about it when you think in comparison with other customization features. Like instruction is something like a guardrail that you define for your entire project, and it's read every time when you talk to your agent. But skills is more specific, and then it's composable. You can have multiple skills and then have it do a really complex task. And then those skills are only picked up when you give a task to your agent and it figures, oh, this is a relevant thing. So it's not read every time like custom instructions. And I want to show you all how skills actually look like. So I'm gonna pull up my screen. If Leslie, could you help me show you my VS? Can you all see my VS now? Let me know when it's up.
Yep, we can see it. Yep.
Okay, yeah. So you can find all your skills in the tool picker here. So it says select tools and skills, and then the skills are all here in this tab. And then I want to show you what exactly it looks like to further demystify it. So I'm going to open the skill in File Explorer. So I have this Copilot SDK skill, which helped me use Copilot SDK to build my own agent in my own app. And then every skill is defined in a folder. And then the name of the folder is the same as the skill. Now inside the folder, you must have the skill.markdown file, which looks like this. Let me scroll up. It has a front matter of the name and then description. These are required components, but then you can just go in really depth into how Copilot should perform the task. Then in this case, it's about teaching Copilot how to build agentic apps with the Copilot SDK. So in addition to the markdown file, you can also have other files in this directory as well. If there are additional context your agent would need when performing this skill, you can add more markdown file to provide the context, or you can even provide scripts to kind of for the agent to run when running your skill. So basically, skill is defined in a folder. And then Leslie had a really good point of thinking skills in comparison with custom instructions, and I also kind of want to further kind of go in that route and then talk about skills in comparison to other customization features in VS as well. So let me share my slide. Can you all see it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. So before jumping into details, I also want to quickly emphasize the importance of customization. So what you have inbox directly in VS is some agent, we prepared with the system message with the model. It's pretty good. It's trained for general task, but it doesn't really have the in-depth knowledge in any specific area or any specific framework. So that's why customization is super important and relevant. That's how you make your agent work the best for your team. Teaching it the specific context about how your team work and what is it about, or what is it about your framework, how do you write code in your repo, all of that. So just like how you onboard a new teammate to your team, you need to tell your teammate where are the docs. Maybe sometimes you need to handhold them for the first few tasks they do. You need to do the same for your Copilot agent. You need to customize it to get the better results. So we talk about skills. It is best for defining reusable capability the agent can pick up and perform consistently. And then skills are loaded by the model. So when you give the model a task, give the agent a task, the model will pick which skill is relevant. So how it works behind the scene is in the system message, we'll append all the front matter for all the skills that are turned on. So we'll append all the name and description and send that along the system message. And the model will see all the skills it have, and then we'll pick which one is relevant, and then read the full skill if it thinks this skill is relevant for the current task. And then we have custom agents, which is a way for you to customize your agent for a particular constrained workflow. Now, once you have it created, you can pick it at the agent picker to use it. This is like kind of creating a persona, a role for your agent, which is like an expert in a certain domain. And then we also have MCP, which is super helpful that help give your agent access to external systems and data. And all the MCP servers are loaded at the start of the session. And to kind of better illustrate, go ahead. Do you have a quick?
No, go ahead.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I like having cheat sheets like this, especially in our world of ever-changing AI concepts and terms and knowing when to use whatever the other. So
I definitely feel that. Like when I was first time learning about these, they all kind of blend in my brain. I was like, what are the difference? It was like it's a lot of markdown files. Like, what are the difference of them?
Yeah.
So this is a story I tell myself is, you give your agent a task. And then the agent will look at its toolbox to figure out, oh, what tools do I have? What capabilities do I have to resolve this task? If the agent needs some, external information, external API, then it will like, oh, I need to get an MCP tool to help me with that. But then if the agent realizes, oh, this task, I know how to do it. I have a skill just write about this task. Then I will go ahead and then find the skills I can use. And then on top of that, you can also customize your own agent, customize how it behaves and what knowledge it has. You can give it a specific model, you can give it contextual knowledge or tools to create your own custom agents. So it's thinking about kind of creating a own expert on one topic. So it's like separating certain context knowledge with others. For example, I think a good example for custom agents is like, I personally have an agent which is really good at accessibility, have a lot of deep knowledge about that, but then that agent might not have other general context about my project. But then I just turn to my accessibility agent whenever I have a related question. So I'm kind of separating my work knowledge into different agents. Yeah, so that's how I think about all of them and how skills, custom agent, and MCP work together.
Sweet.
And talking about, what skills are, I want to next dive into where do they live and then how you can create and define them in VS. So skills can go through different levels. First is user level skills. Think about these as your personal skills. You want to use them in every project. Then these are not shared with your team. Maybe you have some particular skill or habit of how you want to do something, and it's not as relevant for a teammate, so just store them under your own user profile in the .copilot folder. And then you can also have the solution and repository skills that are shared across with your team. So those are part of your repo, and then you push them, and everyone in your team will be able to get them automatically. The only difference is the solution skills, they are stored at the same level as your solution. Then the repository is for if you have a super complex repo that includes multiple solutions, then you can store some of those skills at the root of a repository. So those are shared across multiple solutions, and this is only shared in one solution. Yep, and then I'll show you all these in VS. So again, come back to our tool picker. You can see these are all my user level skills. I don't have any repository or solution level skills defined yet. But here we do have a really cool category, which is the built-in skills. This is gonna come soon. It's not in Insiders yet, but it's gonna release very soon next. And then this is where I bring some .NET and Azure skills inside Visual Studio directly for you to use, and you can turn them on and off if relevant. I won't go too deep in here because Yeonjun and Wendy is gonna really talk about them. And these are super excited, so you don't have to set everything up yourself. We're gonna have something really handy for you out of the box.
Yeah, because a lot of those skills aren't always the most discoverable to find. Like, I think we're going to probably talk about Awesome Copilot, and .NET Skills is another great resource for finding skills that people have already written and are proven to work for the most part that you should totally try. Wink, wink. But yeah, unless you knew about them off the bat, it's a little hard to know that, oh, I should be installing this one. So it's cool that we're adding.
Yeah, setting up could be difficult. Yeah, and I know some customers also ask me, like, how do I know if this skill is reliable or not? Like, I'm working in an enterprise situation. I don't want to have just download some random skill from the internet and not sure if it's going to be secure. And so the good news about all these built-in skills is that they are written by our Azure and .NET experts in Microsoft. I'm going to show you how you can create a skill. Since I don't have any, project skills, let's create one. Super easy to do. You just click this plus button, and then you'll see it asks you which destination you want it to store. Because for my project, it's pretty simple. You only have one solution, so I don't see the repository option here. I only see the solution and global option. But then I also prepared another project here where it has multiple solutions, and you'll see there's a repository option as well. switching back. And then one thing I actually do a lot and that I would love to automate with a skill is creating GitHub issues. And I think this is a perfect one because for my issues, I wanted to structure it in a certain way, and then I'm totally fine with Copilot helping me with it. So I have prepared a prompt. So after you create the skill, it'll give you a template. It just have the name and description, the formatter, and then specifically empty. And what is super good is you can have Copilot help you fill it in. You don't have to fill it in yourself. So in my prompt, I'm just telling it to fill the skill, please. And then for my skill, for my issue, it is either a feature request or bug report. And depending on which type it is, it should have different sections. Like for a feature request, it should have a problem space, description, why we need to add this feature. And then for bug report, we need to have version, repro steps, and things like that.
So would you say those are good baselines to have when writing a skill? And are there like additional tips that people should take when they're writing the skill or having Copilot write one?
Yeah, I think for writing the skill, it's always good to think about what are the most important things, or if there's like a particular step, number of steps you wanted to follow, then that's super helpful to let Copilot know. But I think Copilot is really good at writing skills already, and then you can always iterate it with it super easily. Yeah. And then for me, I also noted that when you are creating a skill, creating the issue, you should use the MCP tool and not the PowerShell commands. And let's see. Yeah, here is the execution guidance about how to create this issue, and it's saying calling the MCP tool with the method. So yeah, that's exactly what I want.
Awesome.
Perfect.
I like it's short and sweet too, which usually that's a good thing with skills, right? We don't want them to be too
long. Yeah, that's a really good point. I think with the new usage billing model, extra length always means extra tokens, and that's like more on your bill. So having short and sweet is always great. Yeah. Okay, perfect. We have the skill, so let's give it a try to see if it actually works. And then I'm gonna create a new thread. Personally, I always love to start with a fresh thread if it's a different task, so I don't contaminate the context window. And I highly recommend you all to do that as well, because you can save more tokens. You don't if the previous history is not relevant, the agent does not need to know about it. Yep. And then so one issue I want to create is this is my app. It's a national park tracker. I want to use it for myself to track which parks I've visited, which I haven't. And
I am behind. I've been to like not. I've been to Denali. I've been to some of the Alaska ones, so I guess.
Yeah. So I'm a lover of national parks. I definitely want to hit all of them. And then, but you see, I have an awkward bug here, where this button is not centered. So I'm just gonna take a screenshot. Be like, this is my bug, and I want Copilot to help me file a bug report. File a bug report. As an issue, please. And then I'm gonna attach that image. I'm gonna send it to agent. Then now my agent get this task, and then we'll look through its toolbox to see, what is the relevant thing that can help me complete this task. And they find this create GitHub issue skill, which is good. And then I think now, it's calling the MCP tool. Let me expand it. And then asking permission if they can run this MCP tool to create the issue. Okay. I think my window is frozen.
Did it freeze?
Yes.
Or no, I think you just had that.
Yeah. Allow this time. It's gonna go create the issue. And then let's also double check, my skills after created, it is marked as a local and then separating it from other skills because this is stored project-wise. And then you can always edit and then open this in the File Explorer as well.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Seems like it's fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Something that I wanted to point out in there is that you did not explicitly call that skill in your prompt. And there was a question in the chat, like, do you have to reference it by name in the prompt? Ideally, no, you do not.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Which is cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
so Copilot should just be able to pick it up if it's registered as a skill.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to call it out explicitly. So what the model, what does the model do is it will read the name and description of every skill and then figure out if the skill is relevant or not. And then so it's very important for you to have a very descriptive skill. Descriptive description. Sorry.
Yeah.
Have a good description so the model can figure it out immediately. Oh, this is something I should use. But if you want to really enforce a skill, you can always just say it in the prompt, like use this skill. But I think in my experience, 99% of the time, the model figured it out perfectly.
Yeah, for the most part, it's worked for me without having to prompt it. Every once in a while, usually when I'm demoing it, because of course it is, that's when it decides not to invoke the skill. The demo gods are like, nope. So yeah, worst case, sometimes you do need to call it. But if you've got a solid description, and also in my skills, I like to add some bullets on when to invoke this skill and when not to invoke this skill. Like if you have like specific use cases for it that maybe aren't readily apparent, it's a good little chunk to have in your skills sometimes.
Yeah, that's a great tip. So yeah, here is the issue. I helped me create it. It has the sections I want as I define in the skill, the version info, repo stat, priority. So that's great. So that's a very easy, demo. But if you want to look for skills that can help with your workflow, as kind of Leslie already hinted, we have a lot of great resources for you. So Awesome GitHub Copilot is a repo of community contributed skills. And then there's a lot in there. I love browsing and see what are the new skills available. So actually, I found the Copilot SDK skills that I was using from this repo. And then I use this Copilot SDK skill to help me added agent in my national park app that can help me create a plan to a park. So there's a lot, it's a treasure trove. And then what is also really cool is the .NET skill and Azure skills, which I'm really excited about. And I'm going to hand over to Yonjun and Wendy to talk more about them.
Sweet.
Thank you, Simona. Yeah, thank you for the amazing overview on agent skills. And you're definitely inspiring me to set up my own skill for creating GitHub issues, because that's what I do day to day. Since Simona did some level setting on what agent skills are, I'm not going to get into too much details, but I do want to show you Azure skills, which is going to be built into Visual Studio starting from next week. I kind of want to think about Azure skills as the brain behind all the operations, because as Simona mentioned, agent skills are really great at like giving that procedural knowledge and Azure and domain expertise to coding agents. And that's why I kind of want to think about it as the brain behind all the Azure operations in terms of Azure skills. So there are currently 28 different curated skills.md files that encode Azure domain expertise for coding agents. And as you all know by now that they are all workflows, decision trees, and guardrails set specifically for Azure tasks. So some of the scenarios that Azure skills currently cover include preparing for a deployment, validating a deployment, which I'll get into in more detail later in this session, and also deploying, diagnosing issues, and many more, which I'll kind of will browse through them together in the Azure skills repo. So you might be wondering, why Azure skills matter right now. I think a lot of these points were made by Simona earlier on, but I do want to reiterate that skills can be loaded on demand. So there's, you saw that there was like a front matter that consists of name and description, and there was the body of content, right? Azure skills also use the same, standards for skills, where essentially when coding agents initially look for skills, it's only provided the name and description. So only that part is getting loaded onto the context, and only when the coding agents see it as suitable for the task that it's trying to perform for developing on Azure, that's when the rest of the content gets added into the context window. So, you can expect some context conservation when you're using Azure Skills. Another thing I want to talk about is that it's auditable, so it's versioned. I'll show you in a bit where you can find that information. And but yeah, and Azure Skills can be reusable, and it's designed to pair naturally with MCP. So essentially, like a lot of the Azure Skills do reference the Azure MCP tools, which are also built into Visual Studio as long as you have the Azure and AI development workload installed. So these kind of pair nicely to really create a good experience for you when you're developing on Azure and Visual Studio. So with that, let's hop on over to where the Azure Skills can be found. So this link right here is where you would find Azure Skills. I'm going to provide the short link in the chat as well. But yeah, so here's the README. So this not only goes over Azure Skills, but it also goes over the concept for Azure Skills plugin. And essentially what Azure Skills plugin is, it's a shipping vehicle for not only Azure Skills, but also Azure MCP server, as well as Foundry MCP server. So all of the layers where, I said that Azure Skills is kind of a brain behind the operations, right? I want to kind of think about Azure MCP server as the hands behind all the operations. So it's the one that's actually executing on your real Azure resources. So all of these are kind of bundled into one package. But in the case of Visual Studio, what's really nice about it is if you download the Azure and AI development workload, which I think you typically do if you're working on Azure anyways, you kind of get all of these tools built in to Visual Studio. So yeah, the repo here goes over some of the instructions for if you were to use this with other in other environments, like how you would set it up. But for today's, I'm just gonna skip that part. And here, under the skills folder, this is where you'll find various Azure skills. So each of these folder directory is a skill on its own. And then each of them will have a skill.md file. And you can see it's very similar to what Simona was demonstrating earlier. It consists of the name, the description, it has some metadata, it's versioned, and it has the author information. And you'll notice that the author for all of these skills that we're showing today for Azure, but also for .NET, are written by Microsoft authors. So you can be rest assured that these are very high quality and have been audited. Yeah, so
also, real quick, and this example, it also had a references folder. That's something that skills can sometimes have.
Oh, yes. Yeah, so those are the, yeah, I'll get them to get it. After I review this skill.md file, I'll quickly show you where they are. So here I'm dialed into the Azure deploy skill, and essentially there's a very authoritative guidance on when this skill must be invoked and when it should not be invoked. And in the case of Azure deploy, it's only going to be invoked when you when the agent had already called into Azure prepare and Azure validate to essentially prepare a deployment and have validated the bicep. And it won't be called if these steps haven't been already performed. And these are the triggers. So I think there was a question in the chat, asking, what are how do agents know when to call these skills? So essentially, these are the trigger words for this particular skill. So as long as your prompt is similar enough to any of these scenarios, it's likely that the agent will pick up your skill. Yeah, and then here are some rules, and then step-by-step guidance on how to deploy. And then also it references some of the Azure MCP tools that should be used as part of this workflow. All right, let me go back. And yeah, and then in the folder structure for Azure deploy, not only do you have Azure, the skill.md, but you also have the optional references in this case. that consists of all the best practices and different set of instructions that are needed for deployment scenario in Azure.
Cool. So would you say that if somebody's writing their own skill, and ideally we want to keep the skill.md file short and sweet, or as short and sweet as it can be, once we start getting into things like best practices and like here are some examples as to how to like write things a certain way, that's when you might consider a references folder?
Yeah, so the references would only get pulled into the context when it's needed. So that's a good way to kind of structure your skill to conserve the context window. All right, so with that in mind, let me switch over to my Visual Studio and kind of show you what I had done with Azure Skills in Visual Studio. So as Simona was showing earlier, you can access the Azure Skills in the list of tools here. So I just want to quickly show you basically what I did. And this is a step that's going to take some time. So I just ran it beforehand so I can show you the results. So when I started off, I had a very bare bone just weather API on my project. And what I had done with Agent was basically I asked it to set up Azure infrastructure for deploying this app to container app. And I specifically said, do not actually deploy, because if I don't, then it's actually going to kick off the Azure deploy skill that I had talked about. So that's why I specifically had said do not deploy, so that I can just show you how the planning and the validation works. All right, and we can see that as soon as I share this prompt, Azure Prepare was invoked, and then basically from then on, it was like reading through my workspace structure to gather more information, and then it created a skeleton plan to basically deploy all this code to Azure. Yeah, so it came up with the deployment plan.md file, and then you can also see downstream, like it also called other Azure skills. For instance, like checking for quota, because that's important, right? You want to make sure that whichever region that you're trying to deploy to, you have enough quota to deploy. And then also, if you go further down, you can see that it's also invoked the policy skill to ensure that the generated bicep and everything is basically complying to the Azure policy that I have on my subscription. And here is kind of showing like all the things that have been performed with the simple prompt that I gave. And these are all the Azure infrastructure that had been set up as part of this exercise. And it's ready to deploy. You can simply do AZD up, or you can use our Azure deploy skill to deploy this project to Azure. And if I look at Solution Explorer, I have the main.bicep file. So like I said, this infrastructure infra folder wasn't there to begin with. And all of these have been created by the agent using the Azure Prepare and Validate skill. And I can kind of show you the main.bicep. Yeah, it's taken care of all the dependencies that are associated with container apps, like it's set up log analytics, application insights, container registry, container apps environment. So it took care of that for you. All right.
Sweet. This is a quick comment. I think this is a really cool example of how skills are composable. Like this is a very complex task, like to prepare the project for deployment, and then you can just give it a very simple prompt. But because you have all the skills, and they can just call the 3 or 4 relevant skills to complete this super complex task. So this is super cool to see. Yeah.
Thank you.
The thought of having to do that deployment manually is very scary to me. So yeah, nice to be able to have this mix of skills and also related MCP servers working together so that you don't have to worry about that. And you just get the file and you can hit the deploy button and be on your merry way.
So. Yeah, exactly. Also, I want to just show you a quick demo on, basically agent calling into some of the other skills that are available as built in. So let's look for cost management and just make sure that it is on, and then the resource lookup as well. Okay, and I'm simply going to ask agent to basically show my historical cost for the last 30 days, broken down into resource groups. Yeah, I have it set to bypass because yeah, I trust agent to do the right thing, especially with the skills enabled. I'm positive that it'll follow the right workflow. So that's why I have it set to bypass, and save me the trouble of clicking yes to all the prompts that pop up. Yeah, but you can see immediately as I typed in my prompt, the Azure cost skill was invoked as expected, and then I read in the workflow for querying the historical cost, because the Azure cost skill itself has 3 different workflows that it supports. One is querying historical cost, the other one is forecasting, and the other one is getting recommendations for optimization. So you can see that it's accurately pulled in the right workflow in this case. And it's basically now, setting my subscription scope and figuring out, which subscription I'm trying to get this information on. Yeah, and this is I just want to highlight the cost skill because it's a really good way to kind of like shift left and bring FinOps practices into your development workflow. Because oftentimes this is something that you would have to go to the portal to check, or you would have to work with the FinOps professionals to get visibility into. But as long as you have the right set of permissions to access this data, you can simply do it in your own in the IDE of your choice in your own engineering workflow.
Yeah, it's nice having to not have to constantly be back and forth between like the Azure portal and Visual Studio with these. I will say, shout out to my personal favorite skill and or MCP server, the Azure Kusto one.
Oh, yes.
Us PMs, we have to write a lot of queries and get telemetry and on data on like adoption of different products and tools and stuff like that. And it's a real pain in the butt. And it's a pain in the butt now because we have skills and MCP servers that can generate those queries for us. Which is great.
That has been a very popular tool among Azure MCP tools, actually, because it kind of like, there's no learning curve for you to, you learn how to query using KQL anymore. You could just simply use natural language to query into Kusto clusters. So while we're talking about Kusto tools, here's the cost breakdown provided by the agent using the Azure cost skills. It's able to give me a nice breakdown of the resource group in the last 30 days and for my particular subscription that I was scoped to, and it gives a nice summary on what my top spenders are. So at this point, if I was like a FinOps professional, or if I was really wanted to practice FinOps in my engineering workflow, I would dive deeper into this resource group that's costing me the most money. But with that, that was just a short and sweet demo on how to use Azure skills in Visual Studio. I'll pass it over to Wendy to show some cool demos on .NET.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Azure skills are incredible. In order to get to be able to use those Azure skills, we need to have some great .NET code to deploy out there, right? So we have at the .NET team has spent a lot of time putting together this great resource called the .NET Skills Repo, which provides you with a whole lot of, I think we're up to over 90 skills to help you in various areas. If I scroll down here, we've got them divided up into several different plugins that you can install into your repos or into your user space. And so you can pick out whether you want to do general.NET, or if you're focusing on doing some data access work, Diag, specific to NuGet, working on Maui, whatever area you're working in. Even we've got some skills to help you get started with the coming .NET 11. And then down at the bottom, instructions on how to add this repo as a marketplace into your environment, how to bring in and incorporate these plugins, all available there. One of the really cool things that we have done is we're making very sure that the skills that we are providing as the .NET team are things that are going to provide you value and not make things more expensive for you. And so we have this dashboard that we have created that runs through all of our plugins and all of our skills and provides a kind of a regular touch point as the models change and as the agents change underneath to see, is this skill still providing value over doing the task without it? And how much is this costing you by adding this skill? And so you can go and browse through each of the different plugins and the various tests that we provide, so we can see, the added value, the number of times it's passed, what score it got without in the gray, and then the blue and green being the skill by itself or with the whole plugin installed. From quality perspective, and then the efficiency over time. Obviously, in a lot of cases, vanilla is going to be cheaper because it's not adding the extra context. But here we can see in some of these cases, it's a little bit mixed. Sometimes, even with the skill, we're able to do it faster and cheaper, even with the skill. And so really great resources there when you're looking to identify what skills should I use? Do any of these apply to me? You can go and understand that we have taken the time to make sure that we're making this environment better for you.
That's a good point. And we'll confirm those validators are tough cookies to pass. Like, I've written some skills for .NET skills repo, and it took some time because you got to get them past the evaluators and validations that have been put in place for those reasons that Wendy just mentioned. And yeah, you really have to have a very well-defined skill that's actually going to save people time and money at the end of the day to get a pass on that repo. So can confirm the stuff on that repo are well vetted.
Yeah, we're strict because we care about you. So in here, you can see, again, the skills. I have added a bunch to my local environment. We have the built-in ones. The question was asked about, how does it know which skills to pick up and how do they get invoked? Each description is loaded into the context window with the prompt. And so that's why a lot of these are off by default to start with, because we don't want to fill up your context window with stuff that you may not need. And, Visual Studio and the .NET and Azure teams were working really hard to kind of gauge what are the things that you need most based on what types of work you're doing. And so we're looking to load and turn on and off and make available to you the appropriate skills based on the solution that you have open and the type of work that you're doing. That work is all ongoing and coming. And so right now we're starting when the built-ins come, they're starting off by default, but they're here for you to turn on as you need them. And as we get that confidence that we are doing the right things, that you may start to see them start to come on. And so here I have that performance review one. I'm asking it to review my application and suggest 3 performance improvements that it can make. And as you've seen with Simona's and with the Azure skills, it's going to think first, understand what it has to do, and then it brings up and starts using that skill and it gets to work. And it's going to keep working until it has figured out. It's going to follow all of the great instructions that we put in there and identify our answers there. And just to kind of give you an idea, I can here edit the skill directly so you can see the types of things that the .NET engineers have found important when analyzing an application for performance, what steps that they have said, these are the important ones for you to take in order to get the right information. So, first load your reference files, then detect, code signals to understand where there could be some room for improvement. And then it provides the instructions on how we want the report to be resolved. So, what should this report look like? And so when you run this across, if you own several applications, you can run this same skill across several applications, and your report can look the same, which makes it really easy when you're trying to go to your leadership and say, I need time to invest to make performance improvements. You'll have a similar report that you can share across all your applications. And that's one of the great values of these skills is you define what you want it to look like. And so we provide you these skills. You can install them and use them from the .NET Skills repo, but then you can modify them to meet your needs. Like this is just the way that they are out of, the way that our .NET engineers want them to be. But if something in here suits you better, you have the ability to go in and modify, create your own versions of these to make it more your own. The great,
they're like highly specific templates.
Sorry,
they're like highly specific templates.
Yes,
like if you want, like you have something that's a good baseline for you, and it's just missing like one or two little bullets or something, you can add away, edit accordingly.
Absolutely.
It's cool.
Absolutely. And so this one has provided us with this great report on, this is the critical type of performance issue that you should fix right away. Some of them that are more moderate. And then, if there were any info ones that would put them down there. And so I love using this to see what work I should be doing.
That's a great one. A similar one that's like that I like is there's a code coverage analysis skill on the .NET Skills repo that's really cool. If you're somebody who wants to see like how much of your tests are actually covering or actually being, how much of your code is actually being covered by tests, then you can use that skill as you're running the built-in tool that already exists in VS, the code coverage tool, to get that initial baseline with the numbers, but then the skill adds on to that and gives you a full analysis of like areas of opportunity for improving your test or writing some new ones. What are the most like critical gaps that should be addressed versus just looking at numbers and trying to interpret on your own. So cool stuff. You can do so much with skills.
So much cool stuff. One of my favorites in the testing space is the CRAP score, which is analyzing your change risk and anti-patterns. And so it does look at your code coverage and all of that to create a score to help you understand where you should be focusing. Obviously, nobody's going to get to 100% code coverage. This will help you understand where are the critical paths to help you get to a more, a better place.
Yep. Oh, there is a question in chat real quick. It's will there be a centralized location for skills on a GitHub org instead of in each private repo or in the user's profile?
I can take that one. I think that's a great question. And then we've been hearing customer feedback about it a lot. So the answer is like, we don't have it yet, but I think this is probably something that's gonna come soon or like will be on our roadmap. Currently, there's GitHub organization level of custom instructions as well as custom agents. So I feel like skills is just gonna be the next one being tackled. So for right now, I think the best way is to just use the repo level skills to share them with your teammates.
Awesome.
Yeah, awesome. And so this one, we showed, help me understand how I can make my app better. But when you actually want to write code, we have skills for that too. This one is one of my favorites. It's focusing on making minimal APIs. and so I just gave create an API that would allow me to display the competitors' prices for the products that I'm offering in my store. And so it right away called that a minimal API skill in order to help it understand some of the best practices when creating APIs in a .NET environment. And so this one, first it created a plan on what to do, and then it went off and started implementing that plan. So not only do we help you understand things in your environment, but we can also provide you with these skills, provide you with best practices with writing the best code that you have.
That is great. Yeah, sometimes it is a little overwhelming because it's like there really is a skill for everything, or there can be a skill for almost everything. I think the thing I'm missing is like a skill for writing skills, and that probably exists. Sure. But yeah, but definitely
awesome Copilot repo.
Right.
The Copilot CLI does come with a skill for writing skills. So yeah.
That's funny.
Out of the box, you get it in the CLI.
Great.
Yeah, let us know if you want that in VS inbox as well. If that's something you're gonna be helpful for your development, we'll add it, to VS. Create a developer community ticket, and then we'll
+1 for that. I support it. Great. So at this point, we talked a lot about like what's currently available, and some of those built-in skills. Those are they're not in insiders for VS, right? It's coming in next month's release or later.
Yes, I think it just missed the insiders like a couple hours, I believe, but it's gonna be there very soon. I think we're looking at the next release version should have it, but also 18.9 insiders will definitely also have it.
Sweet. Yeah, so stay tuned for a future release party. But yeah, it's cool to see all this. A lot of the skills stuff that all three of you shared, that was like super new to VS as of like either this month or a release ago, I think. The skills support wasn't there just like a few short months ago. So now if you've been somebody who's like ride or die on skills and you've been waiting for all of that to make its way into VS, you should go use VS now because it's there.
.NET Skills is continuing to evolve and grow, taking developer input. It's a open source repo for y'all to submit your suggestions, your issues for us to consider to getting published in there. So if there is specific things that you would love the .NET team to be doing to help provide to make the experience better for development, please do submit those issues right there into the repo.
Awesome. And as always, share any issues related to VS and how it's handling skills directly in the IDE. Go to help, and I think it's like report a feature or report a bug, and that'll redirect you to the developer community where it's already filled in the blanks with like your version and other system info that we might need. And real people read it. So we promise we will do our best to take a look and try to address the issue or maybe consider a new feature. And with that, any final words from anybody before we close out? All right. Well, Simona, Wendy, and Yeonjung, thank you so much for being on the show and talking about everything there is to know about skills. I'll try to go back after this episode is done processing, being recorded, and fill in the description with all the links that we're talking about. But just as a quick remember, go to awesome-copilot. You can also go to .NET Skills to get pretty much all things in the skills space and beyond. And be sure to update to the latest version of Visual Studio, as always, to stay up to date on all things agent skills support. And until next time, thanks again, everybody, for watching. And thanks again to my awesome coworkers for sharing what they've been working on, and happy coding.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, everyone.